We are going to be speaking about Freedom Matters. You've heard of a couple of our programs already where we mentioned who Freedom Matters is, what they're about, what are some of the initiatives. And some weeks ago, I would have had a conversation with Mr. Adrian Alexander. He's on the line there with me. Mr. Alexander, good morning to you, sir.
Hi, morning, Michael.
And welcome again. It's good to have you on this morning.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and good morning to all of the wonderful people of Grenada. This morning, I'm unfortunately not joined by my co-host, Dr. Sharice Francis. She had an emergency arise, but we are blessed with the company of Dr. Marta Furlan as we discuss child labor in the Caribbean.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for introducing her. And just a quick bio. You said her name was Dr. Marta Furlan, yes?
That is correct.
Yes. Good morning to you, ma'am, and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for hosting me.
It is a pleasure to have you. And just to give us a little bit of context, Dr. Marta Furlan, she's a senior program manager for research at Free the Slaves. She's also a research fellow on climate change and conflicts at EXEPT, and a non-resident research fellow at the Center of Armed Groups. Marta holds a PhD in international relations from the University of St. Andrews in the UK, and her research interests also include the human rights impact of climate change, with a special focus on indigenous communities. She's passionate about community-based participatory action research that involves people in the formulation of solutions. So she's coming with quite some stripes on her shoulder, and we are very much happy to have her with us this morning. So Martha, tell us just high level, what's your involvement with the organization Free the Slaves?
Yes, sure. So I'm working at Free the Slaves alongside Mr. Adrian Alexander here with me this morning. And within the organization, I'm the senior program manager for research. So I'm the person responsible for designing and implementing all the research projects that we conduct globally.
Okay, nice. All right, so just before we get too deep into the conversation, I'd like for Mr. Alexander, just to tell us a little bit about the initiative and the mission of Freedom Matters.
Sure. Freedom Matters is an opportunity for us in Free the Slaves and for the Caribbean Coalition Against Trafficking in Persons to really share with the Caribbean some of the work that we do in this area of combating human exploitation, whether it be trafficking in persons, child labor, forced labor, or other contemporary forms of slavery. So as some of your listeners would have heard over the past few months, I believe we started in the month of March on the last Thursday, we would have been sharing some information about initiatives that Free the Slaves or the Caribbean Coalition would have undertaken. And actually, some of your listeners may be able to detect that they have heard the voice of Dr. Marta Furlan before. We shared a clip a couple months ago of her and Dr. Celia Aurora speaking about a case study on Antigua and Barbuda, where they were exploring the intersection of the climate crisis and human exploitation, looking at how since Hurricane Irma, the redevelopment of Barbuda in particular, and some of the policy and development changes made in Antigua and Barbuda as a whole, how that aligns with addressing issues of human exploitation. For example, she would have spoken to several stakeholders in Antigua, and they would have shared with her from government and civil society some of the changes that would have been made and some of the challenges that people may have experienced in terms of the loss of their livelihood and their vulnerability to exploitation in the aftermath of Hurricane Irma. And of course, that applies to all of our Caribbean territories, especially at this time, as we are already well into the hurricane season. Mm-hmm. But we have to appreciate there are these intersections, because a lot of people say things like human trafficking, we don't have that here. And that's simply because they've not been sensitized as to the various dynamics and how it can show up, right? But there's definite intersection between our vulnerability to climate impacts and vulnerability. Therefore, you find that impacts loss of lives, livelihoods, loss of housing, destruction of infrastructure. So a lot of people really are put at risk. And these things are exacerbated simply because we have children who may lose family members, may lose parents and become orphaned or be separated from them, and they're now in the care of someone else who may not be an actual family member. There are persons with disabilities who, again, may be separated. They may have to relocate from their home to an emergency shelter in a particular jurisdiction. We were told by government stakeholders that family members just did not come back for their loved ones who live with a disability after the particular disaster had passed. However, they were claiming and receiving the disability benefits, right? So that's another form of exploitation. Right. So there's so many different things that can happen. So Marta, thankfully, is really spearheading our initiative in our region for research. And right now we're doing some research on how trafficking survivors experience their interaction with Caribbean judicial systems, whether those survivors are from the Caribbean or migrants who were trafficked into the Caribbean. We're looking at how they experience their interaction with the police, with prosecutors, with judicial officers, so that we can recommend improvements in how those actors engage with survivors, so that interaction could be a lot more humane and trauma-informed and survivor-centered.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for that comprehensive overview there. And something that you said, right, in relations to the human trafficking, a lot of us, we don't know how to identify what may fall under the umbrella of human trafficking and even child labor and even exploitation. Some of it may be numb to us. Some of it we may see in our mother or father or parents, gone through certain situations. So it seems to be the norm. Nothing jumps up. With all of the initiatives right now and all of the deliberate attention that you're putting on this, what is jumping out at you when you start to consolidate your numbers and when you start putting things together? What raises your eyebrow?
I think I could probably give you an example from some training I'm doing now with some educational professionals in the Eastern Caribbean. I wouldn't want to mention the particular jurisdiction, but like many others, they had the perception that human trafficking doesn't really happen there. It's all about sex trafficking and, that type of myopic view. And it's largely because of what the media tends to cover, right? Yeah. But as we engage in conversation and began to share with them different ways this can manifest, everyone had a different name for it, right? Culturally, we've developed different terminologies for things. Unfortunately, some of those terms actually are blaming the victim. So we spoke about child begging, right? And the different assumptions people make when they see children begging on the streets. We spoke about children involved in gangs. And again, the assumption is that the child is willingly joining the gang, and this is what they want because badness is in style and so on. Right. When we began breaking it down and asking the question, why? Right? Why would a child join a gang? Oh, for belonging. Why would a child need belonging if they have a family? Something's wrong there that is pushing them in a certain direction. What we know about gang life, especially in the Caribbean, isn't just that it's attractive, but sometimes you cannot say no or face dire consequences. Right. So that's coercion. Right? And therefore that brings it into the definition of trafficking in persons. We spoke about labor. A lot of people don't appreciate that there's a distinction between child work and child labor. And that's something Marta covers in the child labor fact sheet. And breaking that down helps people to appreciate where that line of demarcation exists. Right. So as education professionals, they would have realized that some children are not coming to school. And then you have to ask, why? Why? Yeah. Right? And how then can we develop interventions? And I think that's one of the areas where we do need to see an improvement. The assumption continues to be that this is the government's responsibility. Right. The police and them, they're supposed to sort that out. Right. And really helping to bring to light even especially in the case of children, as that's our topic today, what are the provisions of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child? How can the violation of a child's rights in trafficking in persons or child labor really result in their being denied of specific rights? And even going further, how are we not engaging them in solutions? Because as children under the UNCRC, they are guaranteed the right to express their views on things that are happening to them and to have those views taken into consideration and given due weight by government agencies.
Right.
So earlier this month, there was the World Day Against Child Labor on the 12th of June, and the day before, Marta participated in a webinar that we had. We had someone from the Employers Consultative Association in Trinidad and Tobago. We had someone from Haiti and a young survivor of child domestic servitude from Haiti, and a CARICOM youth ambassador from Suriname, speaking to these things from the perspective of a youth, right? And that's really how we need to address these things. Yes, there's a problem. Yes, there's a violation according to law, but it's affecting children and young people. So we need to hear from them, learn from them, so that we can develop even more effective interventions. They should be co-designing and co-implementing along with the adults and policymakers. So that's one of the things that really stands out as we do this work, a lack of awareness that children's views matter and that they're being exploited in far more ways than we had understood before.
Right. Good. Thank you very much for that. All right. So you mentioned about the child labor fact sheet. Tell me about that.
Marta?
Yes, I'm very happy to do so. And just before I jump into that, I wanted to mention that if someone among our listeners today is interested in understanding a bit more about the definitions of human trafficking, child work, child labor, on Free the Slaves website you can access a glossary that gives definition in a simple, accessible language, gives a definition and explanation of these very complex terms. Now, back to our child labor fact sheet. This is a new resource, new knowledge output that Free the Slaves, as my colleague Adrian was saying, recently launched in occasion of the World Day Against Child Labor. And it's a resource that we created as part of our broader commitment to advancing children's rights and supporting efforts to prevent child labor across the Caribbean. This fact sheet serves several purposes. First, it's thought of, put together as a practical resource for everyone who is working to protect children in the Caribbean, including educators, community leaders, civil society organizations, and government officials. What it does is it provides an accessible overview of what child labor is, the forms that child labor takes in the Caribbean, the factors that put children most at risk, and the consequences that child labor can have for children's well-being, education, and future opportunities. Most importantly, however, the fact sheet was designed for the children themselves, and here I'm reconnecting to some of the thoughts that Adrian was sharing with us earlier. So too often, information about child labor is produced for adults only, while the children most affected by the issue have limited access to information. So we wanted to help change that. So the fact sheet has a child-friendly version that explains in a simple language what child labor is, how it differs from just helping out parents in the home or learning a skill in a safe environment. So it helps children understand their rights, recognize situations that may be harmful or exploitative, and learn about the protections that exist in their specific country. And to conclude, I will say that it includes practical information that children can use directly, for instance, the minimum legal working age in their own country, or emergency contact numbers that they can get in touch with if they or someone who you know is in need of support.
Right. Okay, that's good and very thoughtful that you'll have a child-friendly version of that fact sheet. And may I ask, how are the children getting access to that fact sheet?
We have on the Free the Slaves website, as I shared with you last month, Michael, people from the Caribbean can access the Caribbean page directly, freetheslaves.net/Caribbean. We're also disseminating the fact sheet to social workers who we have trained in our Community Liberation Initiative Toolkit. So we've trained roughly about 200 or so social workers in different jurisdictions since late 2024. So we're doing virtual training and some in-person training here in Trinidad and Tobago. So we're providing them as well with the fact sheets and the educational professionals that we're training so that they can get it into the hands of our youth.
Okay, great then. Okay, so far, what findings emerge from those fact sheets, would you say? It's organic to the fact sheets.
Yes, that's a great question. So what we are finding in the fact sheet is that child labor remains a significant concern throughout the region. Approximately 1 in every 8 children in the Caribbean is involved in child labor. And we're talking about very young children, between 5 and 11 years old being the majority of them. When it comes to gender differentiation, boys are more frequently identified as child laborers, but girls are also affected. And some of the reasons why they may be less identified is because they are typically involved in tasks, in labor activities that take place within domestic spaces where they are less visible than the activities that boys are more likely to carry out that may be taking place in businesses, in the street or other spaces that are more easy to detect.
Right.
So if we look a bit, zooming again into the most common forms of child labor, in the region we have domestic work, street mending, farming, construction, and manufacturing. And these are activities that, of course, can expose children to physical danger and exploitation.
Yes.
Now, looking at the reasons why child labor is still observed in the region, one major factor is poverty. When families struggle to meet their basic needs, children may feel the pressure to go to work and contribute financially. Another important factor is limited access to education. In some communities, schools may be far away, or educational resources may be scarce, or opportunities to continue education beyond a certain level may be limited. And when children leave school early, they necessarily become more vulnerable to entering the workforce. Another factor that is quite associated with child labor is family instability. So children who find themselves in unsafe homes, children who experience neglect or lack adequate support may find themselves seeking ways to survive independently. Migration is also another dynamic that connects quite strongly with child labor, because children whose families have moved either within the region or across international borders may face barriers when it comes to access to education, social services, or stable livelihoods, especially if this migration journey took place beyond the formal pathways. And finally, I would want to point out that cultural traditions can also play a role. In many communities, children help with family business, family farms, fishing activities, and here is where the distinction between child work and child labor really becomes important, and something where we need to create more knowledge and understanding, because there is nothing bad, inherently bad, in helping the family out. The problems arise and the border between work and labor is crossed when those activities become excessive, dangerous, or when they interfere with a child's education and healthy development.
Right.
And finally, we'll conclude this overview of the findings by saying that there are very important consequences to child labor. First, it affects children's health. Dangerous working conditions can lead to injuries, illnesses, or long-term physical harm. Second, child labor can affect emotional well-being, so children who work in difficult conditions may experience stress, fear, loneliness, anxiety, and grow up having low self-esteem. Third, child labor undermines education, so children who work often miss classes, miss school, they struggle to keep up with their studies, and as a result, even later on in life, they may face fewer opportunities and more easily find themselves working in informal sectors where conditions may be less regulated and less safe.
Right.
And finally, child labor can create a cycle of poverty that continues across generations. So when children miss out on education, on opportunities, they may grow up facing the same economic challenges that their parents faced,
Right.
increasing in this way the likelihood that their own children will also be forced to work.
Well, thank you very much for that, and I'm pretty sure that even in our communities here, that the persons listening to this conversation, they may be surprised that some of these may be viewed as ills, so to speak, because they may believe that they were preparing the child for what they think is a solid future, in that regardless to what happens with you educationally, then you have something that you can fall back to. You have the land, you have the garden, you're taught the family trade. You know, we are farmers, you are going to be a farmer. If you want to do something else added to farming, then that's fine. But we are farmers and we're going to train you as a farmer. We are builders, we're going to teach you how to build. You know, we're going to take you on the job site. You know, those sort of things, feeling as if they are doing something positive and preparing their child for whatever possibilities may present itself in the not too distant future. So I'll say a lot of education, as you've alluded to, will help to bridge that gap. I know that if through our last conversation, Mr. Alexander, you've spoken about, you know, connected with various organizations and stakeholders in the various regions, you know, to help us all to be on the same page so we can reduce child labor and those sort of things. So what can you guys say, you know, just high level, to anybody that's listening to us, you know, what recommendations to our stakeholders, you know, that we can all, you know, just to pay a little bit more attention to this with the effort to make some necessary adjustments so that we can reduce child labor for all of those great reasons that you've mentioned a while ago?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Thank you. We do conclude the child labor fact on a positive note, meaning that child labor, as we said, remains a serious concern across the region, but it's also something that working together, governments, schools, families, communities, young people themselves, we can address. And in terms of more specific recommendations, we believe that governments can do a lot by strengthening laws, improving enforcement, and ensuring that all children, even those that live perhaps more rural and remote areas, have access to continuous and quality education. Schools can also play a very important role because they can help to identify children who may be at risk, provide support, and encourage them and their families to stay in school. Communities can also be more aware of the signs of child labor and help to create safe environments where children are protected and taken care of. Families can also be more aware, attentive, and seek support when they face hardships and prioritize children's education whenever possible. And finally, young people themselves should know that they have rights, and this connects to what Adrian and I were saying at the beginning on the reasons why we wanted this tool to be child-friendly and accessible. No child should be forced into work that is unsafe, exploitative, or that prevents them from learning and growing. And knowing what their rights are and what avenues are there to seek support is key to addressing child labor.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And I look forward to continuous conversations as we continue to, you know, educate our stakeholders on how to identify and how to treat with the child labor. Any final thoughts, as we are quickly running out of time? Any final thoughts or anything that we still need to cover that we haven't yet?
I think we covered it all, but I would just want to conclude by really emphasizing the importance when we work on issues that affect children to make whatever resource we produce accessible to the children themselves.
Okay.
I'd like to endorse that and really to encourage the people of Grenada. As Michael was saying, people genuinely believe that they're doing right by their children to bring them into the family business, train them as in whatever area that is, in agriculture and fishing and so forth. But they're 24 hours in a day. So ensure that you're not, as you do that you're not preventing your children from accessing their education. In all of our territories, we have a mandatory age within which children are to be in school. Don't violate that, because it's usually developed based on scientific facts in terms of child development and brain development. So you can easily, after school, on weekends and so forth, impart that wisdom and that give that experience in terms of the family business or the family trade. But insofar as humanly possible, allow the children to learn, to grow, to socialize with other children, because that's part of their holistic development.
Right. And well said. And thank you very much, Ms. Alexander and Dr. Furlan. Thank you very much for spending some time with me this morning on this topic. And I look forward again to our next engagement. So continue to take care of yourselves. And just before you run, just give us that website one more time, or any contact information.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned earlier, my co-host, Dr. Cherise Francis from the Leadership Committee of the Caribbean Coalition Against Trafficking in Persons, is not here. But if people are interested in finding out more about the coalition, they can go to CCATIP.org. That's CCATIP.org. And for Free the Slaves and our work in the Caribbean, freetheslaves.net/Caribbean.
Mm-hmm. All right, thanks again for that. So, guys, I'm going to let you go now. So take care of yourselves. Thank you very much, and do enjoy the rest of your day, and enjoy the weekend when it comes around.
Thank you so much, Michael. You as well.
All right, God bless you guys. All right, folks, there you've had it, and I would really like